So the first thing we need to consider shooting when you're doing your mini documentary, your video story, is the A-roll interview. The A-roll interview is basically when you're questioning a person who's looking to the side or into the camera, so straight into the camera. The A-roll interview, as I've mentioned before, is it's more important that we get good audio, but of course it's good to get good video as well. But we're primarily interested in good sound, and that means we need to be completely in control, again, of our environment. I keep stressing before that we need to make sure that there is no background sound, there is no white noise, we have a location that's as quiet as possible, and that we're recording at the perfect audio input level, which is, as I mentioned before, -6 to -12 decibels. That's where the peaks are bouncing as you're recording your audio. A few other things that we need to keep in mind when recording our video interviews is the microphone placement. We're going to be working with the wireless lavalier, and I'm going to use some of the students as a demonstration to show you how that's done. But we also need to think about the space within which that person is sitting. So are they comfortable? Is there good lighting? We also have to think about using the rule of thirds, placing them to the left or to the right of the frame, and how they actually look into the frame. And here are 3 examples that I've shown you about when you're questioning a person on camera. And on the top, first of all, you see a person looking directly into the camera. That's not how we're going to shoot our videos, but that is actually really, really good technique to use when you want somebody to give something that has a very direct emotional connection to the viewer. In that case, you'd put them directly in the middle of the frame and have them looking straight into the camera. Now, it's kind of awkward and uncomfortable for people to do this kind of an interview because they're looking into an inanimate object. They're looking into the lens of the camera, and they're not looking actually at somebody that is asking them the question. Again, it's powerful emotionally that you're going to have this direct connection to your viewer, but it's a bit more awkward and difficult for the person you're interviewing. So we're going to work with one of the other 2 options, which is, you'll see the bottom row where somebody's sitting on the left side and looking through the right side of the frame, or sitting on the right side and looking into the left part of the frame. And we do that, we basically have them look into this kind of empty space, and we move them off to 1/3 of the left or right side. And I'll show again an example later on with some of the students of how we would set something like that up. We also have 3 different shots that we can use. We have what's called a wide shot, we have a medium shot, and a tight shot. The wide shot works that we show the entire environment within which that person is sitting. So often it's actually quite good if we're going to shoot an A-roll interview, that you have that person sitting in a space that has some kind of connection, has some kind of meaning to their story. For example, if you're going to talk to, let's say, a cook, you'd probably want to have them seated somewhere, maybe in their kitchen or in the restaurant. If you're talking to maybe a computer programmer, you'd want to have them sitting somewhere where there's a bunch of computers around them. So the environment is very important when we're talking about the wide shot. The medium shot is looks more like the 2 bottom shots, where we have them full frame, full face, and we have half of their chest basically showing. So this is probably what you will use to shoot most of your A-roll interviews, something like that. So you see their full face, you see a little bit of the environment, but you don't necessarily need to see their hands. And the 3rd shot is the really, really tight shot, which is the one that's in the top, where you have somebody really just focused on their face. And we want to use a shot like this to look at the emotion. Let's say they start getting very emotional, maybe they're crying or they're laughing or they're getting very, very intense. So you want to have a tight shot of what it is that they're talking about to show the emotions on their face. And this, it's kind of course, hard to tell when you're going to have a person that is going to get emotional. And how you're going to zoom in very, very quickly to get those kind of shots. Because as I said, you're probably going to mostly be shooting the way the 2 are on the bottom, where it's more full head and half of the chest and some of the environment. I'll demonstrate that as well with some students later on. So I'm going to show you how we use the tripods. These are fluid heads. This is a standard video tripod. With multiple legs that come out. What I recommend for sit-down interview is we only extend 1 level of legs, and we will only do the thicker
the thicker legs, not the thinner ones, because the thinner ones makes it a bit less stable. So we'll leave those in. Extend the legs all the way out, so they're fully extended. Okay, so we have the tripod out. Make sure this is all out. That's all out. Lock it in place. Okay, so as I said, this is a video tripod. So we've got several different knobs to work with here. Let's open up some of them. So this one deals with the left, right. This deals with the up, down. We also have this right here, which we can lock into place. Let's lock that in. This right here is up and down. And this one right here deals with your left, right. Now, as you can see right now, this head is very crooked. So we need to straighten this up. And if we look very closely right here, we have what are called bubble levels. There's a bubble in there. And there's another one right here that also has a bubble. So what we need to do is we need to get the bubble in the middle of the little black circle. To do that, this right here is called a ball head. And so it's a ball that sits inside of a cup. And we need to move that ball around so that these are level, because otherwise we're going to get crooked shots. To change this so that these bubbles in the right place, this is red. And if you look at this part of the tripod is also red. We're going to loosen this up. And after we loosen that up, this whole thing loosens up. Right? So now we're going to put the bubbles in the black circles, that one and that one. Now we tighten it back up again, right? And now we're going to have even straight shots. Again, this one right here, that's for loosening to go up and down. This one right here is loosening to go left and right. And this tightens up here. This right here, this little knob right here, that's going to be for us to take this hot shoe out. And that's what we're going to attach to the video camera. Okay? To remove this, first of all, we loosen this part right here, pull it back, push the red button in. There's a red button we have to push right here, and then it pulls completely out. So let's get a camera. And I'll show it as well. Is it in focus? Okay. On the bottom of this plate, there is something that says lens. Okay, and it has an arrow. The lens is pointing in this direction. So that means when you take this plate, this needs to go on the bottom of the camera, and it needs to point in the direction of the lens. Okay? So that screw goes right in the bottom of the camera. Tighten it down. So it looks about like that. To make sure that's really tight, all you need to do is take a coin, tighten it down, right? Now it's on there really good. To put it onto the tripod, we follow the lens in the direction of the handle. Slide it on, snaps into place. Once it snaps in place, it's still not on there tight, it's still moving. Now we need to tighten this little thing right here. We tighten that up, and once that's all tight, then it's on there, right? Then it's solidly on there. So now we have the tripod, the camera on the tripod. We're in control with the handle. Flip it open, look at our screen, flip it on the video, and now we should be ready to record. Okay, that's how the tripod works. Now again, I would recommend keeping it on the small legs when we're doing the interview, which we'll do in a moment. But when you're going to be shooting B-roll action, then you can take the legs, extend them out further, here, here, and here. And now you get a tripod that's obviously much higher. Okay? And that's going to record more at the height of a human. One last thing we can do, if the tripod is not high enough, if we need to get the camera up higher, we can actually extend this middle bar. Extending the middle bar, we loosen up this part right here. And the middle bar comes up, so now we can get the tripod really, really high. The only part is I recommend never doing this because it's not so stable. There's a lot more shake and a lot more movement. So this should be your last resort if you need to do something where you need the camera really high. Otherwise, it's best to always just keep this fully down, tightened up, locked into place. Again, make sure your bubble level here and your bubble level there are even. If they're not, change it, we fix it again, move the bubbles around. It's in the black, more or less. Tighten it up, and now we're ready to go. Okay, and that's it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start setting up for what's called the A-roll sit-down interview. I've taken away the shotgun microphone because the shotgun microphone we're using to shoot the B-roll sequences, the action video. Now we're going to use what's called the lavalier. This is a wireless lavalier, a small clip-on, actually which you can see what I'm wearing as well. But I'm going to show you how to put it on here, and in a moment I'll also show you how to attach it to a person. So the lavalier consists of several different devices, which I've talked about before. This is the transmitter. This sends the signal from the person being interviewed to the camera. This is the receiver. That's going to go on the camera. And we've got two cables. All right, let's deal with the receiver first. The receiver is going to have the small black box. That is what we're going to put on the hot shoe on the camera. Same place as the other microphone. Put it on. Screw it down. Make sure you take the end that has the little spinning part. You attach it in here. You screw it down tightly. Right. The other end, which is the mini clip, that's an L, that goes into the side of the camera, exactly where the other microphone is plugged in, right here. Okay. Flip open the top. You need to put your batteries in there. Push the on button, hold it for a little while until the display comes on. So that means the transmitter is now, the receiver is ready to receive the signal from the transmitter. Transmitter, which is the other part, we've got the plug that goes into the top of the transmitter, screwed on. And we have the clip-on microphone, which is on the other side. Flip this open as well. Turn it on. Once it's on, close it. Now we should hopefully be getting a signal from here to here wirelessly. So we're going to clip this onto our interview person later on. As they talk, they can sit there, and we're going to get the signal from there to there. And as long as we've got this plugged in to the camera, it overrides the microphone that's built into the camera. So all of our sounds should be now coming in that way. In my location, I want to find a good background, a good place so that I can set my person somewhere to hopefully show something in the environment where they work, where they live, where the story takes place. So in this case, we're in a gym and we're setting up an interview with the person who, let's say, is a personal trainer or someone who owns the gym. So to start off with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn on my camera. I'm going to look in the back of my frame right here. And I'm going to decide and look to see what is a good location. So as I kind of move my camera around, I'm going to look in the back of here to see what kind of looks nice as a background. And I think what I found is I like the fact that we have these mirrors, but we have to, of course, be very careful with mirrors because those mirrors could catch ourselves as the interviewer and the camera person. But so I found a location over here. I've set my two chairs up. Here's the person that's going to conduct the interview. Here's the person that's going to be interviewed. I have my tripod and camera right here. I'm going to connect my camera onto my tripod. Right? And I'm just going to frame the shot again. So the way I've got it framed now, and I'm just going to do a slight little recording here. I've got it framed, so I've got the camera here, and I've got this as the background. And we're going to do 3 different shots here later on when we do this little sample interview. One, again, is a wide shot. One is a medium shot, and one is a tight shot. So we'll do those 3. So this, again, is just a setup to get a good background, to see kind of what the background looks like. You want to make sure that you're in control of the environment. This, I might want to move it a little bit away so that's not in his head. There was a piece of paper up here that I removed. I want to maybe make sure that nothing's too flashy or too crazy in the background. And then once I'm all set, I do the interview, and of course afterwards I replace everything back to how it was again. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set up my interview with the 3 shots, wide, medium, and tight. One thing that I said before is when we're shooting our sit-down interview, I want you to turn your lens to manual focus. I want you to turn your command dial to manual as well, because now I want you to be in control of all the settings. For example, if I leave this on autofocus, what could happen is it's always going to focus on the background. It's not going to actually focus on my speaker, so I need to make sure I'm focusing on him. So I'm going to zoom in very, very tightly first on my speaker. Focus it. Once it's in focus, I leave it alone. I don't need to touch the focusing anymore, and reframe my shot. So now I've got him on a wide shot to start off with as he's looking over here at my subject. Okay, so now this is my wide shot. So as you can see, I can see the full environment. I can see the gym behind him. I can see him sitting here. Now I might want to shoot one or two of my questions like this. Then I might want to move. This is called the medium shot. So now I've got him more like this. This is more head and shoulders. I might want to shoot some interview questions like this. And of course, later on, if we're talking about something that's really, really important to him or to your subject, I want to shoot something very, very tight like this so that we maybe get the emotion out of the person's face. Make sure that if you're going to shoot something tight like this, that we cut off the head, but we don't cut off the chin. So we need to make sure that we're not cutting the chin off here, but the top of the head is fine. You want to get really, really tight on the face. A few things to keep in mind. When you have your interview person here, you should not adjust your camera while the person is talking. Okay? When you have your interviewee here, you leave the camera alone, you set it up and you leave it alone and you let them talk. And there's no need to, if they're moving around, there's no need to follow them around like this, okay? Just leave the camera alone because eventually they'll come back to their original position. After maybe your interview subject has asked a few questions, then you may want to say, hold on 1 second, readjust your camera, remove it, tap your teammate on the shoulder and continue with the next question and then just continue to leave it like that. Now you know that an emotional question is coming up. Say, wait 1 second. Zoom in very, very quickly. Refocus if you have to. Once you've done that, continue with the next question. And that's it. So what we're going to do now is we finally got the full team here, and we're going to pretend like we're doing the sit-down A-roll interview with Paboy, who is a personal trainer. He's very muscular, by the way, and he is the owner of this gym. So he is going to be our interview subject. Anastasia and I will be the interview team, so she's going to be the person asking the questions, and I'm going to be working the camera. We've already shown you how I look at the space, how I decide what it is that I'm going to shoot. We've set up the space here. We have two chairs facing each other. So Paboy, I'm going to have you sit here. You're the subject that I'm going to interview, and you get to sit here as the person who's going to conduct the interview. And then I'm going to work the camera. Now, as I've already mentioned, we are going to work with the wireless lavalier. So already on the camera, we have the receiver, which is connected in, and then we're going to hook up Paboy with the transmitter. So now what we want to do is we're going to mic up Paboy. That means we're going to put the microphone on him so that we can use this wireless lavalier, this little tiny microphone that we're going to clip onto his shirt. What's great about him right now is we see he's got a dark shirt, and this is a dark microphone, so we'll be able to hide most of this. Ideally, we want to try to hide as much as possible. Now, since Paboy doesn't have a jacket on, or a vest or anything like that, we need to find a way to hide the cable. We would never just mic him up with the cable hanging in front, because if I'm going to record that, we're going to see the cable. So a few things we can do is either I'm going to ask my interview subject, in this case Paboy, I would say, he's got a collar, so we can work with the collar. We can hide the cable under the collar. We're always going to want to put the cable down the back, never down the front. Now, if he were to have a collarless shirt, a t-shirt, what I would say is I would ask him to put this up his own shirt. I'm not going to put my hands up and down anybody's shirt. So in this case, I would say, if you want to, please go to the private space and put this underneath your shirt so that it is basically coming out of the top. But in this case, because we've got the collar, I'm going to work with the collar to hide the cable. So I'll just hide it underneath here. If I have some tape, perhaps I can hide it underneath there. And I'm going to clip the microphone something like this. I want to make sure that the microphone is pointing towards his mouth in a way. So we've got it nicely hidden in here. Let me get my cable here. I'll take that from you. We're now going to screw this in. Flip it open. Turn it on. Close it up. I'll hide it down here so it can't be seen. Cable is hidden. Just inform your person to make sure that they don't move too much, to make sure that they don't touch the microphone, to make sure they don't hit their chest because it'll bounce very, very, and make very loud noises. And you also need to be careful sometimes. In his case, since he has short hair, we're not going to have a problem with hair that's rubbing into the microphone. Sometimes when people have longer hair, if they have more scarves or something on, it could rub the microphone. Of course, we're going to pick that sound up very, very loudly. So in this case, Paboy is mic'd up. We'll do a quick test on the camera to make sure that the audio is working fine, and we should be ready to go. In this case, I'm going to work with Anastasia. Now, as you can see, she has a light sweater on. So this will be showing a little bit more than usual. One good thing is she does have longer hair, so we can use the hair. Can I touch your hair? It's okay? Okay. We can use her hair to hide the cable a little bit, right? We can kind of move that around. If she didn't have longer hair, she had it put up. Again, I would ask her to, if she could, she would put it up the back of her sweater, and we'd have it come up to the front, so it's basically right here. Now in this case, because we don't have the collar as we had with Paboy, since we just have her one simple little collar here, if I just put it like this, we're going to see too much of the cable. So I'm going to take the cable and I'm going to loop it, and I'm going to create it like this, and I'm going to use that to hide the cable down inside. So this time we clip it more like this. The cable is going to be kind of pulled tight and hidden. Pull the hair over top. Okay, so hopefully that should work. The hair is a little bit close. If you can just look up as you would normally be looking over here. It's a little bit close to her hair, so I'm just going to move it over just a little bit more. Hide it underneath. And I think we should be fine with something like that. Okay, yes, we do see it a little bit, but at least this way we have the cable hidden behind her and it's going down the back rather than coming down the front. Another problem, if you do have the cable coming down the front, or if it's on the side right here, if you have a nervous interview subject, they may want to grab the cable and they may want to touch the cable, and that again will cause kind of problems. So we want to try to keep this as far away from them as possible. Okay, and that's it. That's easy to mic up. May I go ahead and pull it off? All right. And always be in contact. Explain to your subjects why you're going to be doing things, why you're going to have them put this microphone in certain places, why you need to touch them, and make sure that they're always comfortable with that. So now I've got my interview subject, I've got my teammate here who's going to be asking the questions. Ideally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you move your chair forward just a little bit. Get them somewhat close to each other so they don't have to scream back and forth. Okay? They always should be facing each other. She's hopefully going to have notes in her hand, otherwise everything else is going to be empty. Now, the camera, I'm the camera person. I want to try to get the camera as close to her shoulder as possible. I don't want to have the camera way out here, because now if I look at the camera, he's going to be looking off the side of the frame. If I have the camera right here, he will be looking at my teammate, but he won't be looking too far off the side of the frame, so we can have them looking at each other this way. Again, try to keep the camera as close as possible, right over the shoulder. Another thing I want to do is, I want to make sure that my camera lens is on the same eye line as my subject that I'm interviewing. All right? So I'm pretty good here. I think that my camera is about the right subject, or about the right height. Otherwise, if we're shooting from too high, we're looking down. If we're shooting from too low, we're looking up, and that causes a little bit of a distortion. Okay. So, working with a teammate now. I'm going to frame my camera. I'm going to start with a medium shot. My medium shot is basically going to be of Paboy from the chest up. Currently I've got him so maybe his hands are cut off, so I may want to zoom in just a little bit more, so it is pretty much just his chest and his head. Ideally I want a really, really good lighting position. It's not good in here, because if I look at my camera, and if you look at here, I can see that I've got a direct overhead light, and it's causing these raccoon eyes in Paboy. That's something we want to try to avoid. If necessary, I may want to put a lamp here that's going to project some kind of light this way. But just for this case, because we're just practicing, I think it should be fine to work with like this. So here's the important part. We're going to leave the focus on the camera on manual focus. I'm always going to do everything by hand. I'm going to leave my command dial at manual as well, so I can set up my aperture, and I can set up my shutter speed, and I can set up my ISO, because I don't want to touch anything, because if slight changes happen, the focus may shift, or we may get fluctuations in the aperture. So we want to leave everything. We set everything up to start off with, and then we leave it alone from then on. Now, this is the point where myself and my partner, she's going to be answering or asking all the questions. Our interviewer will be answering the questions, but we still need to be in kind of communication. And that is silent communication. We can't be talking while our subject is talking. So we've already discussed beforehand, we've got 20 questions we want to ask. We know the first 3 or 4 are softball questions. Please introduce yourself, tell me something about the gym, those types of things. So in that case, I may want to start with a medium or a wide angle. So I can see the entire gym in the background, and I can see my subject, and those are simple and easy questions. And we've already agreed beforehand, after the fourth question, now she's going to asking more difficult questions. And that means after the fourth question has been answered, I'll just say, hold on 1 second. I want to readjust my camera, readjust my positioning, readjust whatever focusing I have to do, readjust anything else. I'm ready to go. I tap her, next question. I leave the camera alone. I don't do anything to the camera. What may happen is while Paboy is talking, he may move around, he may move forward, he may move back, he may laugh from side to side. If he does any kind of movement, we don't move the camera, we don't follow the person around, we just leave it alone. That person will always come back to their original position, okay? Now we know after the 6th or 7th or 8th question, you're gonna ask the really, really difficult questions that will probably make poor Paboy cry. So in that case, we wanna get that really tight shot of the emotions in his face. So again, I say, hold on 1 second, I reframe, I'm very, very tight on Paboy's face, I refocus, tap my partner on the shoulder, and we're ready to go. And now the tough questions happen. What could happen, let's say I am on a medium shot, and suddenly Paboy gets very emotional. He's very happy, he's very animated, and I want to get that emotion in his face. But as I've already said, we leave the camera alone. We don't do anything when the person is talking. In this case, it's more important to get the emotion. So the camera person can quickly re-zoom in, re-move around, and then leave the camera alone, all right? Because then we need that emotion. But typically, we leave the camera alone. We don't do anything as long as the person is talking that we're interviewing. Everything is fine. Okay? Back to our wide shot. My teammate is asking all the questions. We are in silent communication with each other. I've got a good line of sight. I've got good light here. Hopefully we've asked all the right questions. And then the last thing that we do you remember what that is? What's the most important thing to do at the end? We ask our person, is there anything else that I forgot to ask you? Okay? Now is the time for them to take over the control of the interview. We've been in control of everything else before. Now it's his turn to give us any information that we may have forgotten to ask him. Because this is his story, this is his interview, he needs to finish the interview at the end.
Now that I've shown you how to set up an A-roll interview, a sit-down A-roll interview with my two subjects here, I want to have you actually look at a short video piece where we can see how both A-roll and B-roll work together. You'll notice, of course, how the person is sitting off-center, is looking into the empty space of the frame. We're using the rule of thirds to place them over to the left side. The lighting is good across their face, so we don't have the raccoon eyes. Very, very nice sound. It's not too loud, it's not too quiet. We don't have echo, we don't have any sounds in the background.
When I was a kid, I had a lot of friends that collected like sports cards, baseball cards, things like that. And I didn't really have an interest in that. So I collected like movie cards and TV collector's cards. And so that's just what I ended up with, a whole bunch of those. It's kind of ridiculous when you look at the collections that I have. I mean, I've got old, big name movies, E.T. and Star Wars and things like that. But they even made these cards for Charlie's Angels, a TV show. And I think I've even got some Dukes of Hazzard cards. It's really a silly collection. I think there was this assumption when I was growing up that you could collect these and save them for 2 or 3 decades and suddenly they'd be worth a whole lot of money, and that just turned out not to be the case. I mean, I keep them around because, well, once you had something for this long, it's kind of hard to get rid of them.
Let's go over our video interview checklist. Most importantly, always use the tripod. Be in control of the environment. Get away from the white noise. Get away from ambient noise. That means you need to make an effort to turn off air conditioners, turn off computers, make sure that you're in a very, very quiet place. Check the audio level and the microphone immediately on site with the wireless and wired lavaliers if you're using a wired lavalier. That means look in the back of the camera, make sure that your levels are bouncing at -6 to -12 in the peaks. Don't interview people with background music or other sounds. Remember, we have to record in a very, very quiet place. We can always add the ambient sound and natural sound effects and music later on. Set up your interview with a teammate. So do this before you actually bring in your interview subject. Set up the chairs, look at the environment, mic the person up, put the camera on the tripod, and just do a test run. Therefore, you won't be wasting the time of your interviewee when they come to sit down. We can work with a 3-person team when it comes to doing these types of A-roll interviews. We have the interviewer, the person who sits down in the chair, asks our interviewee the questions. We also have a camera person, of course, who's in charge of the camera. Make sure that the audio levels are fine. Make sure that the exposure is fine on the video part. It's not overexposed, not too bright, it's not too dark. That the light looks fine. And then we have the third person, which is equally important. It's the crowd control person, kind of like at a nightclub. They're in charge of making sure that there's no trouble anywhere. So the crowd control person will be there to make sure that all phones are turned off. The crowd control person will be there to make sure that there's nobody walking into the scene, that all doors are closed. They're basically controlling and handling everything to make sure that the interview is a success, so that the interviewer and the camera person don't have to worry about anything but their work. Also, we want to turn off the focus on the lens, so we don't want to have it on autofocus. We want to have it on manual focus, so we hand focus everything. And that again makes sure that our entire scene is in focus from beginning to end, because that person may move around. And if we have it on autofocus, the camera is going to be constantly focusing in and out. We're going to have something kind of like a weird creeping effect of focusing going forward and backwards. Also, control the aperture to avoid under or overexposure. Use the manual mode. Control your f-stop, control your shutter speed, control your ISO. And this will make sure that from beginning to end of the entire interview that we don't have small fluctuations in the video where it turns too bright or too dark. Avoid reflective noise surfaces. This is to make sure that you don't get an echo sound. Get at least 30 seconds of the ambient or room tone at the end. Make sure you prepare your questions before the interview. Know your time limit. Always get people to fully introduce themselves and spell their names. After they do that, do a quick test. Just say, hold on a second, let me make sure that we have audio that's working fine and make sure that we're actually recording. So just after they introduce themselves, hit stop, have a quick review, and then you can start the interview, the full A-roll. Always check the recording at the end of the interview to make sure that everything has worked correctly. And remember, everyone that's there, the person working the camera, the person that's asking the questions, and the crowd control should make sure that they're quiet the entire time that the person is talking.